of uncertainty. My name is Cibrán and I'm violinist of Cuarteto Quiroga. And as you might know, if you've watched the previous episodes, the idea of this project occurred to me weeks ago while I was in the middle of the lockdown, and I was full of questions, and I was reflecting upon these times of uncertainty, and I was far from my quartet colleagues, and I was far from the public stage, from the concert hall where we quartet players share with the fifth presence, the audience, the miracle of conversational music. And I thought that we could maybe transport the very enlightened idea that gave birth to String Quartet, which is a conversation in music, to a similar four-part counterpoint, but this time with words, as we inhabit times of musical silence. So through this series, generously hosted by the String Quartet Biennale of Amsterdam, we have been developing string quartet performance. Four voices from different quartets, all of them groups that are linked to the Amsterdam Quartet Biennale, of course, have been meeting every week to discuss and to debate about music, about the context of silence we're living, and about the uncertain coming future, about programming, about how is life as a quartet player, how to relate to each other, to audiences, about the role of string quartet, and the role that chamber music can play, especially in such turbulent times where probably critical and enlightened thinking is more needed than ever. We've had the chance to exchange ideas with some of the most prominent and fascinating quartets of our time, such as the Hagen, Brentano, Artemis, Juilliard, Doré, Casals, Metaphor, Signum, Daniel, Calder, Umodern, Dudok. And we have been doing it as we do it in concerts, by listening, by reacting and learning constantly from each other's differences, from each other's ideas and gestures, because more than ever, probably, again, it is so important to underline that diversity is a true treasure. For many of us, as we mentioned many times after the conversations, many of the quartet players that have been participating, we've discussed that these conversations it has been like going on stage again, a similar kind of feeling of excitement and adrenaline. But even the nicest concerts have to end. And to close this series of Ricercare, we have planned two very special chapters. The first one is today's edition, which will gather some of the finest quartets of the new generation. Because probably I thought that no opinion is more valuable nowadays to understand what we're leaving and the sense of what we're doing as quartet players and as musicians and as music lovers as well, than the opinion of those who will carry the legacy of string quartet for many years to come. And finally, next week, we will shift the perspective beyond the stage, and we will get together with three voices that, despite of not being quartet players themselves, they represent key elements which keep the world of music spinning around, and that sometimes are never heard. One of them is the promoter and the concert organizer. And we will have, of course, Yasmin Hilberdink, which is the brain and the artistic director of the String Quartet Biennale of Amsterdam. We will have one management agent. We will have a legendary agent which has worked in the string quartet world for many, many years, Sonia Simenauer. And we will have one music journalist, publisher, critic, and opinion maker, because their view is also crucial in how our life functions as quartet players and as musicians. We will have Martin Cullingford, editor of the Gramophone magazine. So their view beyond the stage is also key to have a 360-degree look to these times of uncertainty, and to honor somehow the name of this series, Ricercare, which stands for search, for experiment or something. And so we kindly invite you to watch and share the previous episodes, and especially now to join us and post live your questions for today's Ricercare in both YouTube Live or Facebook Live. So without any more time, let me introduce to you the outstanding lineup of guests of today. I'm really happy to welcome Amarins Wierdsma from the Barbican String Quartet. Hello, Amarins.
Hi.
Great to have you here. And Mina Lojewski from the Affinity Quartet from Australia. Hello, Mina.
Hello.
Nice to have you here. Thank you very much. And we have finally Johannes Marmen from the Marmen Quartet. Hello, Johannes.
Hi.
Hello. It's wonderful to have you here as well.
Great to be here.
So, yeah, thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you for being here. So, let me start just as I've been starting all these conversations because, I mean, it is the most important thing in the end. How are you guys? How are you doing, and how has this strange period of time that we've been living treated you, and how have you been experiencing it? How it's been to be away from stages, from your probably from your quartet? How is this abnormality triggering your creativity or your relation with music? Who wants to start?
I guess I will.
Okay, Amarins.
No, I love
Shoot.
what you said about in the opening statement about like this feeling like we're going on stage, because it definitely does. It's kind of this same excitement, which is really funny. But yeah, and I think that's something I've been missing. Definitely is this kind of sharing of music with audiences. And of course, that's something that hopefully we'll get back to as soon as possible. But I think it's been very interesting. I think talking to friends and for myself, definitely, I've been going through different stages, different days, kind of even depending on the weather, of kind of thinking, oh, this is a really good time to reflect and to maybe get a chance to do things that I usually wouldn't have time for or wouldn't even think about getting time to do. But also a time of thinking, gosh, I think my whole life has been run by deadlines. And ever since I was a young kid, I was used to preparing music for a next step, for either a concert or a lesson or anything that I had to do. And somehow we rolled into, continuing that from concert to concert, and with quartet rehearsals and everything, that all of a sudden having that stripped away was very strange. Going into a time that the next day would be exactly the same as the one before, and that's not something that I'd ever really experienced. So yeah, that's how I've been feeling, basically. Yeah.
Definitely. How about you guys?
Well,
Okay.
yes.
Well, I thought I'd firstly say thank you for making the time change to allow me to say hello and be in this chat from Australia. I'm here in Melbourne, which is the home of Affinity Quartet, and it is also the traditional lands of the Boonwurrung and Woiwurrung people of the Kulin Nations. So I have to pay respect to their elders, past and present. That said, I think it has been, as Amarins said, a true time for reflection. We've had to stop in our tracks, be aware of real crisis and come to terms with that. I think with a bit of distance between March and now, when it all started, I've been feeling more positive and more of an affirmation about getting back into it, doing the concerts, the work that needs to be done to rebuild our scene again, because I think that is going to be huge and uncertain. A good side as well, it has been that I've enjoyed practicing. My partner also is in Affinity Quartet, and he's here. That's Nick. And we both felt that getting off the treadmill and having this time has made us approach our playing and our health, and it's been positive. So I hope that while we're in the wings and being idle, we're able to look after that and then get back in the platforms, and they'll still be there. So that's my 2 cents.
Johannes?
Yeah, I was. I mean, in our quartet, and sort of in my life before quartet became sort of the main thing in my life, then it's always been important to take time off, especially in the summers, because me and my wife, we enjoy a lot like spending time outside and spending time in nature and so on. So we value our sort of long breaks, and so we've always tried to do that every summer. I think the longest one we've had before this Corona situation was something like 6 weeks, and that's something that at least I try to like strive for and push for that to happen. And I was reading an interesting kind of research paper a few weeks ago that was about memory, like how your perception of a musical performance is remembered as in contrast to how it's experienced in real time when you're hearing it. So like the impression of when you're hearing it and when you're remembering it afterwards, what influences those two things, the relationship between those two things. And it was referencing another kind of article or research paper or something that was talking about a concept that's called duration neglect, which was saying that they did some kind of experiment with pain, and if you're subjected to pain for a certain amount of time, when you remember it afterwards, you remember the intensity of the pain, not how long you were subjected to it. And I'm wondering, sort of, at the end of this whole thing, if like it's just gonna feel like one of those long summer breaks, like that. It's obviously in this case it's been more painful than nice, which the summer breaks are nice, and this is more kind of painful. But I hope that by the end of it, and when things finally get back to normal, we will experience this kind of duration neglect, and that the whole world has been on pause, and it didn't matter if it was 2 months or 2 years, and you know, that's what I hope, at least.
I wonder how you guys have experienced time. I like what you're saying, Johannes, about this long period, and for me, it's felt as if the last 3-4 months have flown by in a way that I didn't expect at all. I thought, gosh, I have nothing to do.
I have a friend that calls this period the longest Sunday, and and in many ways I feel that because we're used, I guess, that when we have this extraordinary moments of being at home, for 1 or 2 days, then it's the moment where you actually, as Amarins was saying, you try to do all the things that normally you cannot do when you're on tour or when you're, and so I feel that this has been an enormous Sunday in which I've cooked, I've shopped, I read, I prepared things, and I managed to practice a little bit, but this has been like increased like this.
But it's good that it's a Sunday, right? I mean, I think that's positive. Like for me, it felt like there was one time a couple of weeks in, or maybe 3 weeks in or 4 weeks in, where I kept asking my wife every day, "Is it Tuesday today? Is it Tuesday today?" Because Tuesday is like the most depressing day of the week, in my opinion. And I was like, all the time I thought it was Tuesday. I think one day on a Wednesday, I asked 3 times if it was a Tuesday. I don't know.
Yeah, it's true.
So I have no concept of time. To answer your question, Amarins, like I don't.
Somehow,
it's even worse than normal. Musicians don't know like days, right? Like we don't really.
We know numbers.
Weekend.
I mean, at least I know numbers.
Okay, dates. Yeah.
1, 2.
Yeah.
But like days, it's like Monday, Tuesday, and that's even worse now, I think. At least for me.
Yeah.
It's crazy. I was remembering what you said now. What you were mentioning, Johannes. You were thinking about the different perception about the actual what you have while you're playing and after you've performed. How often, and this is something, and probably for many music lovers, it's curious. How often do you go out on stage after performing with your quartet colleagues, and all of you have the same feeling about what happened on stage?
Ooh, not very often.
Not very often.
No.
Johannes?
Weirdly not.
You drink?
We had it once. We had it once, and that was when we all agreed that was the best concert we ever played. Then we all thought the same. And it was just a random concert. There was no real reason for it. It just, we just thought. But then, who knows? If we would have recorded it and listened back, then maybe it would have been completely different. You have no idea, right?
You felt that as well, no? I mean, we've had so many experiences where we felt it was a terrible concert, and then we listened back, and it wasn't that bad after all.
Yeah.
And sensations that it was a really great concert, and you listen back, and actually it was not as good as one thought. Did you also, do you often experience these situations while playing?
Definitely. I think actually interesting now because organizations are asking, to restream a lot of stuff that we've done. And I mean, there's no point saying no to that if you're somewhat happy with how it sounded at the time. But just the other day, the school where we're studying in Madrid, they asked us if they could restream a Mozart performance that we did. And it was chosen by our teacher that was the piece that was going to be streamed. We had no choice in the matter, and we all said, gosh, why would they choose that? It played horribly. I don't know how on earth they would, why would they decide that piece? We have done many other things better, this kind of reaction. This is usually our reaction in the quartet. And then actually we were listening and we were all like, oh, what a nice piece, huh? Maybe we should play this again, kind of. But I think at the time we felt so kind of stressed, and we kind of always feel stressed playing Mozart anyway, this kind of wanting everything to just be exactly how we want. And just the memory of that performance was absolute opposite to how, I mean, of course there are things that could be better, but it was definitely not this crisis that we thought it was at the time. It's hilarious.
I'm interested in what you say, and I think it's also an interesting point to share. Because of course you have more recent than other fellow colleagues that have been in this series of Ricercare. You have more recent experience of working with so to say, teachers or people that simply listen to you to get certain inspiration. But with those people which were for your quartet somehow, we can call them clear references or mentors or people that really influenced your way of performing as quartets, or that worked with you for a longer period of time. Do you feel, how fast do you feel, or how clearly do you feel that your own personality as a group is departing from what you experienced with these influential people?
Okay. I think it's a tricky question. I think it depends very much on the teacher and what your relationship is to them. Also, how far their tradition is from yours. We work a lot with Günther Pichler, who's our teacher in Madrid, and we love him. And I think the Alban tradition has already had a couple generations from where we are now. So that's interesting. And then working with people who are kind of maybe in between generation, and also listening a lot to people who are in that generation. And just to mention one person is Alina Ibragimova, and listening to her quartet. And the way that they're thinking about tradition and the historical aspect of performing. And I think exactly that there needs to be a balance, and we're definitely trying to find that. And I think that, I mean, we're also not that young anymore, that we're trying to find our way, and sometimes that clashes with teachers, and I think that's okay. That it's a conversation between thoughts about the different styles and different ways. And I definitely also see in teachers that they're wanting to embrace more of what we're looking at today, even if that wasn't what they did in their time, if that makes sense. And I think that's incredibly interesting, and what we're definitely trying to find every time we rehearse is, what is our style, and does that fit with what we think the composer requires, and how does that fit in the time that we're in now.
Yeah, because I somehow feel that there's been, if we look at the recent time, the recent evolution of string quartet playing. I mean, there was this golden age of quartets in the late 80s and 90s. Of course, you mentioned the Alban, and that's of course probably one of the most relevant string quartets in the world, at least in Europe, or probably most relevant of all of them. And then we have this huge explosion of string quartet playing, which becomes something more practiced by more and more excellent top-class musicians in the early or first 10 years of the 2000. And then we have this crisis, enormous crisis of the financial crisis, which creates a terrible aftermath for many of these generation of quartets, which is the generation I somehow belong to or ascribe my quartet to, which were born in those years. And with your generation, which was born probably during that crisis, and now is flourishing internationally, do you feel there's a generation shift also, not only in I'm referring not only in the ways of you practice this métier, this way of making music, but also in a musical way, in an interpretational way.
Absolutely. I think
there's a shift?
we are part of a generation change. I'm also Australian, and our string quartet heritage is not the same as yours. We've had string quartets who are Australian, who are real outliers. We don't have the heritage, the lineage of, you learnt with this person, they taught you, the next group down. It's not like that at all here. Very different. So I guess we've already been part of thinking, how do we define this string quartet? Who's listening to us here, really? We import a lot of string quartets from overseas, and we get to hear amazing players. But our quartet, from our personal experience, was that expertise is over in Europe, UK, the US. So we've come over to Europe twice and had intensive 5 weeks of lessons with multiple people. The most recent time was at the Biennale. And I think that experience, the thing that we gleaned from that was that each teacher actually has such a different method and a way and a style. So I don't think we can see ourselves that there's only one way to do anything. It's just how well we can do it in our voices and together as 4 people, which again is that next challenge that a teacher can't teach you how to do. So that's that learning process within your group. In terms of the generation shift, I think no doubt COVID will be a significant part of that shift of our thinking, or already speed up the process that we have to make that shift to survive.
How do you guys feel about the role of social media and all of this? I definitely think that our quartet is very kind of adverse against the kind of this, eternal streaming and eternal uploading little videos that have no real value to anybody, in our opinion. But we're very harsh on that. And I think something that we've run into before this started was, the question from organizers from places that, we were being supported as young artists is, what is your brand as a quartet? And I think that this has, for us, always been the hardest question. I think this will continue to be interesting in a way that might be also annoying, because, we don't really want to be a brand. We want to be musicians that are playing beautiful music. And I wonder...
Sorry.
Yeah. No, go on.
Okay. Just because what you are saying, I think, kind of sheds light on a kind of... a paradox that I think exists today, because in one sense there's this what you're saying, that you need to be clear with your identity as a group or whatever, to make it more to reach out to more people on social media and this kind of thing. But on the other hand, I feel like where society is right now, really kind of, and where the string quartet history has led to now, is actually a place that's really diverse. And you were mentioning before, Cibrán, about the golden age of string quartet. I actually think we have a new golden age of string quartet now, because I mean, it's difficult for me to say because I wasn't alive in those days, but I think today, the range of different ways of playing and different ways of not just playing, but of approaching the music from an intellectual, emotional, personal point of view is so diverse from different quartets. And I mean, I can say that about the young quartets that we know and that we've seen in the, like, for example, in competitions in the last like 5 years around the world, and everyone has such a like distinct way of playing, and they are appreciated like equally by the juries. Like the juries are also very diverse usually on and so on. And I think that's a really, really good thing about the quartet world right now, which it's really encouraging and really amazing, I think.
What I think what you're saying is fantastic, and I completely agree with you in the sense that we are living probably the time where there are more string quartets,
Yeah.
excellent top class
Yeah.
playing with a huge diversity of voices.
Yeah.
And what I meant with golden age somehow is the time where you didn't have to struggle to survive as a string quartet in the sense that you could have this, you had this there were fewer of course, but you have these great quartets that could fill up a symphonic hall.
Yeah.
And I mean, agents had no problem selling, and now we are facing this situation where even all our generation is somehow forced to this tyranny somehow that you were mentioning, Amarins, of branding yourself. And sometimes we felt, I don't know if you felt this when they ask you, could you tell us what is the personality of your quartet? And I always felt, I mean, it's not for me to say, I mean, you tell me, I do what I believe, today.
That's a good way. Like, you tell me, someone else has to do that for you, right?
Yeah, I mean, but it comes to a point that I cannot sell my, who am I? I'm probably someone, and tomorrow I'll be someone different, So if I put a brand on myself, I would probably betray myself in 4 days. Thank God.
It's actually kind of an interesting exercise, actually, in a way, to sort of try to describe any quartet with like 2 or 3 words, because I think, like, in a way, it's possible. You just have to kind of, I think it's possible. You just have to become very clear in your mind about what your instinct is, what your direct instinct is. Like, when you think about that certain quartet, what are the top 3 words you're thinking about that could describe them? And often, like, if you try to extend that list of words, then you will get into really subtleties quite soon. It's a pretty interesting exercise. But I agree with you. It's total. I was gonna say I don't know what the policy is on swearing here. This thing.
You feel home.
Like in a rehearsal.
Like in a rehearsal.
Okay.
No, but I mean, I think somehow, do you feel that sometimes in the time that you spend as quartet with your colleagues, we are forced, or the market, because of this saturation, and also now we're going to feel it even more probably. I don't know what you think about how it's going to change after this crisis, with probably less money for culture, budgets being restrained, fear coming out from all places in terms of programming and audience assistance and everything, that we have to spend sometimes more energy against at least my will many times in these issues which have to do with branding or selling or posting these little things on social media, than actually to think, what am I going to do with this crazy phrase of this Schumann quartet, which does not fit anyway, and I'm fascinated by it. I want to look at it for hours, and try to, but I have to kind of post a couple of things, do you feel this contradiction in your life, and how do you think we can shift the input of interest towards music, or towards interpretation, and towards listening, plain simple listening, instead of to the picture we create of ourselves?
My experience, though, is if a presenter is selling a concert and they ask you for a bit of media and stuff, you have to be able to provide it. I really understand that, especially as a string quartet. I know in Europe, and you were talking about a golden age. Here, it's less so. We don't have that. So people need to understand what they're going to come and listen to. I was able to access string quartet in high school, but I went to a specialist music high school. So that branding side, I think, and that media access is a real platform that we are going to be working with much more in the future. I really hope that the live streaming of concerts doesn't become permanent and isn't expected to be. But that said, if lots of people are fragile with their health and the situation is not allowing it, maybe we do concerts that are both live streamed and live. That might be a situation for the future. I think, because I also teach some high school students, they're really online and they're all over it and much more comfortable with it. So where we are, we're on a bit of a cusp. And I agree that our presenters, the generations above us, when they're talking about marketing, it's a bit cringeworthy. It can be really cringeworthy, and the kind of content they produce just forced. So we can change that, and I think we do need to make it so it's comfortable and it expresses something really authentic about us and the music while not being so commercialized.
I wonder if there's there was some kind of lagging issue there. I heard everyone say something at the same time, but no, I was just actually I was talking to someone about this subject just a few days ago, and we were saying that maybe this is just like an eternal struggle in a way. Maybe it's more now because of social media and so on, but I'm sure there have always been like extra musical, administrative, boring things that you have to deal with as an artist too. And there are, Beethoven had to deal with his publishers all the time. Haydn had to give names to string quartets, even though he didn't want to, and to sell them. This kind of thing, and maybe it's just like two forces that kind of need to be in this constant friction. Like we need to provide a bit of resistance probably, and not like sell out to this completely. And maybe sometimes Cibrán, like it's more worthwhile thinking about that phrase in Schumann, and sometimes it's not. It's like yeah, exactly, because it's pointless anyway to make sense of it. I don't know, but it's like I think it's an inevitable fact of life, because in the end we are kind of an entertainment business, I suppose. Like I mean, that sounds kind of stupid, because I think we would probably play these quartets even if no one was listening. But like in the end, if we want to do it at a high level, we need to make money, and then that needs to be sold, and people need to buy tickets. Like it's simple, in that sense. So I think those things are always going to be in slight. They're always going to be fighting a little bit, and it's important that we keep the resistance, but in like a in a polite way, and like respecting the other side of it, probably.
I wonder if there's two different ways we can look at it through I mean, you mentioned the live streaming, which I agree completely that hopefully that's not something that will stay just as a quartet on stage, no audience, and a live stream. I think definitely it's important for people who are bound at home, especially now, to be able to share that, maybe not completely publicly that the whole world can watch every single time. But I think the other side, the social media side, it definitely can be used to reach new audiences, and I think that's very important, something that maybe we're not using to the best of its potential, that we somehow see our audience. And I think it's very important that we see the potential for an audience that is not just the over 70, over 80, and I don't think we will ever reach those people on Instagram. So then there's no point kind of focusing our energy on these people through a platform that they're not using. And so I wonder if a quartet can actually be very interesting to young people, and how exactly we can use social media to make it much more interesting. I mean, before maybe 5-10 years ago, when I was still at Guildhall, we were thinking about working with different art forms, how that can create a more interesting platform while still keeping the same quality of the music. I think that's really important, always to have really high quality music. Otherwise, there's no point in doing it. You want to translate the quality of the music and of any art form that you're using. And I think that's the same for social media, that we should use this in a way that can actually reach people that it will mean something to. If it's in the form of a 1-minute clip, make it really high quality, make it interesting, that people can interact in a way like we're doing now, that maybe it gives some insight into what we're trying to do, and to make it more interesting to people who would maybe not come to Wigmore Hall because they're scared of something there, scared of applauding at the right time, or what to wear, these things that we almost don't think about. Yeah.
That's. I mean, as you're getting into things that I already had the idea of dealing with, and it has to do with how do we now really turning the focus more on music itself, and the way we approach music, and the way we program music, and the way we actually understand music. I mean, what's for you the sense? I mean, if we want to reach new audiences, I mean, the world is shifting. Of the audiences of today are not necessarily the audiences of the 80s. They're not necessarily the audience of the beginning or the time of the 20th century, and definitely not the time of where the audiences of the composers we most obviously play, or that are most regularly programmed, so to say, from Haydn to Alban Berg. And how can we somehow, as a players for the future, and as could defend the value of these music nowadays, and the sense? What's the sense of keep playing again and again Haydn, Mozart, and Beethoven? How can we, in your opinion, how does one defend the current value of these classics? So therefore, they're classics. I mean, that they have current value nowadays.
Can I jump in there, because I was just reminded of something I read recently. Supposedly, Bob Marley said that it doesn't matter what kind of music you play. What matters is, or the only thing that matters is the commitment, the absolute commitment you have at the time that you're performing it. And everything else, it doesn't matter. It doesn't. And I think Beethoven said something similar. There's like a famous quote about, wrong note is inconsequential, but if you don't,
Sure.
And so I was thinking like that the fact that those two people, they lived in completely different times, and their music is very different, but they obviously share some kind of like core essence, like some kind of core philosophy of what's important behind music. And so if those two that are so different, recognize that fact, then I would say it would confirm like a feeling that I have, and that is that you can absolutely touch people with any kind of music, and we love this music, right? Like we love it, and the more we work on it, the more we love it, and how we can to share that with other people, then if we can do that like in a heartfelt manner, and where we don't get distracted by other things and other agendas, but that it's actually like the communication of the emotion behind music that matters the most in the moment of performance. Then I think like maybe I'm a little bit idealist here, but I hope that everything else will fall into place, because we will we will go through life, right? Going from situation to situation, our circumstances will be different. Like, for example, maybe we get kids or something, and then we start thinking, okay, maybe our music needs to feel some kind of role for young people. I mean, it's a kind of an obvious example, but there are so many examples like that. In the course of your life, you start having different perspectives and seeing things differently. And then, if you have an art that you really believe in, and you have a platform that you think is worth sharing, then you just take that and share it where you feel that it's important.
But to be thought-provoking and to provoke more of this, because what you're saying, I think it's extremely interesting. Following your line of thought, then, so to say, presenters should believe more often when we say to them, believe me, I want to play this piece, and
Yeah.
I love it so much, and I will do it with so much conviction that, trust me, I could almost assure you that if people don't like it, you cannot pay me, if you want. I've found myself saying these words exactly,
Yes.
and many times I found myself having to say, okay, then I'll play again what you wanted to play, because you didn't try. I mean, you wanted to hear what you wanted to hear, and then also finding in other situations where these evidence, which you were suggesting so eloquently, Johannes, it comes to light with how do we kind of get there and keep being idealistic, because I think it's somehow necessary that we keep pushing gently, as you were
very
saying
difficult.
before. But how do we do this?
Maybe
Because
we don't publish the set list before the concert. Just say this
someone
is
else,
the concert. Yeah.
you're not the first one saying that.
Yeah, yeah. Or
How about
maybe
you? What do
one
you?
half, like say there will be a Haydn, and then the rest is like up for grabs. You can play whatever. And
Mina, you were going to say something?
Oh, well, it's
Or
curious to
Amarins, I
listen
don't
to
know,
you
some of
guys.
you.
It's curious to listen to you guys talking about the presenters and the relationship with certain repertoire, because, you guys live in Europe and the UK, and we think that all this amazing music from the 17th century to now is being made there. And you would think that your audiences would be open to all of that. I heard
no.
Dudok saying, Vlad from the Dudok Quartet saying that Schoenberg was too far out for some of your audiences. So that surprises me from my perspective here, because we have the same, I guess, wanting to preserve certain composers for certain audiences. But maybe we keep preserving those composers for certain audiences, but that doesn't mean that that's the only type of concert we perform. And we have to generate new concerts, new audiences. And I think that is the role of those artistic administrators and leadership kind of umbrella organizations, to be doing that on the behalf of the artists, so that we can say Friday night is this, Saturday night is this, Sunday night is that. It's not just letting some certain audience or some certain agenda take a monopoly anymore. I think we really have to change that.
Yeah, I mean, I have a couple of opinions on this. I think we've definitely struggled here in the UK to program anything that's, Berg onwards. And we had a fight for about a year with an organizer that I won't go into detail, but we won the fight and we did play Berg Opus 3. And I remember her saying to us afterwards, oh, there were actually a lot of people in the hall. I thought nobody would come. And we played Haydn, Schubert and Berg. And I mean, this is ridiculous. And we had no idea that it was so bad, but every single time, well, I don't think we can program something like Schoenberg, every single time. So that's in the UK.
I wonder if that has to do with the fact that we are relatively unestablished still, because our name itself doesn't draw a full house. Maybe when you are more established, you can take more risks and people will still come. I don't know.
Or maybe when you're more established, you become less idealistic and you actually
Yeah.
start giving in into certain things, because it's easy for you to play what you played for all your life, so you have to rehearse less, and then
No.
Yeah, exactly.
I'm being mean, but that.
Yeah, but I don't know. I mean, we worked with the.
Yeah, it's a valid point for sure. Yeah. Sorry, Amarins.
We talked to Irvin Arditi from the Arditi Quartet, right, because we were having this struggle, and we worked with him on something, and we asked him, where do you play in the UK? Where will they accept this kind of music? And they said, well, we don't really play in the UK. So that was kind of the answer for that, and we thought, okay, gosh, we really have to struggle. I think Johannes, one way is maybe to leave it off, but there are so many programmers that don't accept that. They just want to have the program a year ahead of time, and we've definitely felt that struggling as far as we can is the way to go, and saying, as you said, Cibrán, we really believe that this music is important, and we really love, I think, also working with composers and working on pieces that are closer to us in that way in time is so important, also to understand the language of those composers and working with them. I think another way also could be to incorporate some kind of discussion with a composer. We've also proposed, talking to the audience in the form of a concert talk or something like this before the concert, so that we offer anything that we can to make the experience somehow more accessible, that then they're a little bit less afraid. And in the end, there's half the audience say, oh, this was our favorite piece. And it has nothing to do with that they don't like the music. It's that the organizers are afraid of losing audience. And it's a completely different issue in a way. And for me, what we were talking about before, this thing about experience, and I think live music is the only way that we can really go. I think people will always come to a live concert because that's an experience that they can't get from a CD. I mean, I feel the same. If I'm not listening to live music, it's completely different. How I'm experiencing, also how I am in the concert hall, is different every time. So how can a piece get boring? How can an experience get boring? Also from going to schools and playing for children, every single time they love it. There's not a single child at the end that says, oh, I hate classical music. It's just something in the mind. I think live music definitely, and then making it more attractive to people is definitely the way to go for me.
Do you think the younger and the newer generation should be more socially active and really take cultural outreach, as a again, as a brand?
Yes,
of their definitely yes.
Yeah. I think so. I think that starting with children from a very young age, if you start with them in schools as much as we can, I mean, I think, okay, that's up to the government, and it's important that government put music in school. Yes, I completely agree. But as much as we can, I mean, I'm thinking now about trying to start my own festival in Holland, and the first thing that comes to me is, we have to have school concerts. Wherever we do this festival has to be connecting the schools to the festival, so that, I mean, makes the children interested, makes the parents interested, makes the whole idea of classical music much more accessible. And okay, yes, that's probably in a Dutch town that's highly educated, that already has that interest, but I think it's important in every place to connect the children from a very young age, because scientifically it's also proven that if they're exposed to music from a young age, they're far more likely when they're older to be interested in that. So yes, I think
maybe play Schoenberg and Berg and Sciarino and Xenakis and Stockhausen. Although 4 helicopters, around in a school, maybe that I don't.
But they would love that, I think.
Probably. But I mean, one experience I have from our quartet playing in schools is that kids, they don't distinguish between Mozart or Ligeti, and so maybe if we start playing that kind of stuff for them now, then we'll have a whole new generation that will come to concerts in 50 years time or 60 years time, when they've retired want to.
We've had a series of
classical music.
We've had a series of concerts where we played for schools systematically the same program.
Yeah,
it was 15 years ago or something like that, and we played Schubert and Webern. And systematically, we asked the kids which music they had loved the most, and the cry, the outburst of the kids of 6-year-olds saying Webern, madly with enthusiasm was so touching, you know.
Yeah.
Again,
Yeah.
because we believed on this music and somehow and they are so receptive. So I think there's a way to go.
You know this.
In that
You know this. Sorry, it just popped into my mind. You know
no,
this experiment that you ask a kid, do you want one candy now or two candies later? Right.
Yes.
yes,
So
yeah,
with Webern, it's like having one candy now and also getting two candies later.
that's right. Yeah, yeah.
So yeah, they
I
got
like that.
Oh,
that.
so
That's a
cool.
nice slogan,
Yeah.
Johannes. Let's make it. Webern
One
is
candy
one
now
candy
and two
now,
candies later.
two candies
Okay,
later.
that's how
Yeah,
I'm going to describe our quartet to promote. Got
fantastic.
it. Yeah.
That's great. Look, I want to somehow. This is really such a wonderful conversation. I would be here for ages, but we have to start heading up to an end. And I would like to ask you, uh, when I was writing years ago and doing a research about the history of string quartet, and I had to write this book, and I was kind of looking at the quartets that have been here before us, and I was realizing that somehow certain quartets had left a legacy, a certain footprint in the history of the genre. You were mentioning the Arditi, you know, of course, it's obvious the footprint that these people have left, or the Juilliard commissioning so many incredible pieces, or the La Salle bringing up, you know, the generation of Alban Berg, Schoenberg, and Webern, which was even in Europe unheard at the time, you know. So when you look at these old quartets, when you look at yourself, sorry, and you think, you know, let's look at myself in the future. What would you somehow like to leave as a legacy? I know it sounds a little bit, you know, pretentious, you know, but somehow, what it's in the end a question of why do you play quartet, and why would you like to be remembered, or what do you want to give to the world?
I don't know. I think something I just wrote down, love of music. I think that's the most important in the end. And I don't know if now we can already say like, oh, this is going to be our legacy. I think that I believe very much
Not a
in,
small legacy, Amarins.
yeah, like how are we going to develop? I don't really know, and I hope, you know, very well. But I think if we hold on to this love of music throughout our life, and also thinking, you know, every couple years, every year, maybe every day, how can we bring music to more people and help people understand what we love about the music so much, then I think it will be okay.
Lena?
Oh, wow. What would I like to achieve through quartet in my life? Well, I think firstly, I want to do string quartet for that long and be able to. So I think a part of the legacy has to be to make sure that the audiences are not diminishing, and that we play a part to increasing them. So I think at some point along the way, I'm not sure where, the audiences we have now were probably the same audiences we had a few years ago before that, years ago, and they haven't increased. So I think we have to play a big part in that. And also, I think as a quartet, responding to the times. I think that's a big thing that we have to grasp with. We are a very Western and specialized tradition. That doesn't mean to say that we have to stay that way, or that we should continue to stay that way. I also hope it's not too difficult in 20 or 30 years to be a string quartet, and to expect people to engage with us and to have the specialty amongst the generations behind us. I definitely see the value in what we do, and no doubt a lot of people do. I think we just have to make sure that we come together and increase and intensify what we do.
Johannes?
Well, I was thinking that maybe a legacy can also be something personal, like because probably our career will finish before my life finishes. I hope. I think. I hope. I'm not
Hopefully.
sure. Well, yeah. If you start thinking about it, then does that? Yeah. Well, that's a different conversation. But no, I was thinking, because all these things that we talk about, like our ideals, right? About what music should do, what music should like. This thing that Bob Marley said about music, that the thing that matters is that you are 100% committed when you perform. I hope that when our career is finished and we've played lots of concerts, that I can look back and say I really reached that state where I could just embody all my ideals of what I think is important. Because it's easy to talk about it, but it's kind of it's not so easy to practice it. I think, like in terms of like it's not so easy to do it, especially when you're 4 people and with all those distractions that we've been talking about too. And yeah, I hope that it's going to feel like that. Yeah, when I'm done.
No, I think it's fascinating. I mean, you've addressed things that are incredibly important, which is, I mean, being able to share the love of music, which in the end somehow I cannot imagine a better tool to actually spread the audiences, and create the thirst of people to drink music somehow. And I think also this inner struggle with oneself that you're mentioning. I mean, we live constantly in a debate. No, I mean, don't you feel when you look at yourself? Now that we're talking legacy, when you look at yourself even 5 years ago, or your quartet, or do you recognize yourself in the sense? Not, of course, yes, in a very plain sense, but do you see? Did you expect the shift that things have taken in terms even of interpretation or of questioning of dubts? How our methodical dubt has changed through the years somehow?
Yeah, I think it gets more and more in a way. Somehow, when I was brought up in Holland, so lucky to have one teacher from when I was 5 to 18. And for her, the most important, this was Goethe Wijzenbeek, the Dutch teacher. Mm-hmm. She said, for her, this expression was the main thing that was interesting. So, I mean, she was incredibly strict, but the main point that she was teaching everybody through chamber music, through solo playing, through her string orchestra, was expressing yourself and expressing the music. So that's what I grew up with my whole life. And then throughout my education in college, I think more and more this doubting was put into our minds, like, why do I do what I do, and is it really in the music, and how much of ourselves is in the music, and how much of what the composer wants. And I think for a while it was easy to kind of get lost in that, to lose who I am a little bit, and to put too much of this doubt, and then that doesn't translate to the audience at all in my case. So I think somehow a balance in that is what I'm trying to find more and more, is who am I and as a player, and how much of myself can I put into the music while still definitely keeping the composer there. And so, yes, to answer your question, if I look at older recordings, I definitely recognize me. And looking now, I'm definitely recognizing that what I want to achieve is to always keep that doubt, and always to look at myself critically without taking everything away, if that makes sense.
Don't you think somehow, this is beautiful what you're saying, somehow, don't you think somehow that it would be nice to also educate programmers and audiences and our fellow colleagues, each other, share with each other of the beauty of dubbed and fragility, even in a performance itself. Like when one listens to Weg Quartet playing Beethoven, and you hear this kind of fragility, that somehow now is almost not tolerated for us in scene.
Yes.
You need to be like a
Yeah.
tank.
Can I say
That
something there? I
Yes.
had this little thought experiment that back in those days when they recorded, they didn't have they couldn't do lots of takes. They couldn't do they couldn't cut and edit stuff. So it was just like a one moment, like that's how it sounded at that point, right? Like any concert or whatever. And I think right now is a little bit, we're experiencing a little bit the same thing when we're doing these live stream concerts, right? Like we play once. You're not really 100% in control of the result, and then the result is there, and in some cases it's left on the internet, and you feel quite quite vulnerable, like you feel quite exposed by the fact. And I had this idea: what if everything, all the time, was always recorded, always put online forever? From now on, then it would negate the whole thing, right? Like that would just then you would lose this pretense that it's something that is recorded is also perfect because I don't know. It was just
and probably live performances would be less demanding with that perfection, which is unreal. It would change.
Yeah.
It would change our way to shift. Look,
we
guys,
need that challenge also to get.
we need that challenge necessarily. Absolutely. It's been really fantastic to talk to the three of you. Really, I would really continue for 4 hours more. In fact, I wanna meet you more and talk more, and it's been really inspiring, and I think for everyone that has been listening as well, and for everyone who will eventually listen to this, because it stays. So I want to thank you really very much for your generosity, dedicating this time to be here and to discuss, to do some ricerca on what's going on and what will happen. I wish we can meet soon and share music together and share a glass of wine and talk about this and many more things. Thank you really very much. Thank you, Mina. Thank you, Amarins, and thank you, Johannes.
Thank you.
Thank you so much. All the best to your quartets and to your life, and all the best success, and hope we keep spreading the love of music, of dubbed, and all these beautiful things all over the place. And for everyone, thank you as well to the Biennale of Amsterdam for hosting this initiative, and for everyone that has been listening or will be listening to these chats. And feel welcome to watch the other chapters of Ricercare, and see you next Monday on the 6th of July. We will have the last session, as said, with the other side of the game, with one programmer such as Jasmin Hilberdink, the artistic director and brain of these String Quartet Biennale Amsterdam, with Sonia Simenauer, a legendary management agent of string quartets through many decades in Europe and worldwide, and with Martin Collingford, editor of one of the most important magazines of music in the world, Gramophone magazine, to discuss the other side of the game that we've been discussing all these chapters with all these fantastic quartet players, and including our colleagues today here, Amarins, Mina, and Johannes. Thank you very much, and all the best. Stay healthy and stay happy.
Bye.
Bye.
Bye. See you. Thank